in the apartment, maybe everything is different. Like I don't know. Maybe there's competing networks or something. But
Well, who knows, right? I'm sure like bandwidth is being shared and all that drama and stuff. Hey, we're live, by the way. Just not to interrupt our conversation, but
no worries.
So you don't like pick your nose or say anything that's embarrassing.
Like I don't normally do that.
These are sometimes my favorite episodes when Riley's not here, and that's not anything against Riley. I like Riley. I like doing episodes with Riley, but I guess there's just like something like almost dangerous or exciting or like secret about doing something without him. Like he's not here. Like what should we do? Like what should we say? We can do anything. We can do anything we want.
Yeah, and he listens sometimes, right? So it's like he's watching us, but he can't like jump online and
he can't. He can't like verbalize anything. It's like sucker, say what you want. Super fun. He probably will not tune in today since Riley's at the range. Welcome, Mark. Welcome, Cammie. Welcome, Mark again. Okay, so we got a couple people here. We're excited. Today we're going to talk about how to maximize your ROI when you take a class. And I think it's going to be awesome because why else would we do it if we didn't think it was going to be awesome? Whether or not you're going to think it's going to be great or not, what do I know? But here's my experience. Matthew, you've taught probably more classes than I have in your time. But my sense is I often will see students and they clearly show up and they didn't do all the right things they should have done to prepare. Or during the class, you're watching like, dude, you paid me a lot of money. Like you're really not getting your money's worth because of what you're doing right now. And some of it's obvious stuff. Some of it's less obvious. Just those little things like, man, if you would do this, you would get more out of this class. So our intent today is to kind of talk through some of those things and what they are. It's the beginning of summer, so this is the season a lot of you might be planning on taking a class in the next couple of months. So this might be valuable and useful.
Yeah, that's the hope, right?
That's right. That's right. Welcome, Dan. Welcome, William. William says, good afternoon William says, I enjoy your program very much. Well, thank you. That's very kind. Bob says, good afternoon from Oxford, Ohio. And Triss is here. Welcome, Triss. It's going to be great. I think, the sponsors in front of me, so I think we're all set. Matthew, should we rock and roll? It's now noon. We've given people a few minutes to log in who want to be here live.
Yeah, let's do it.
And we're on episode 422, right? I didn't make that up.
That's correct. We're in the same spot.
Okay, Okay, here we go. In 3, 2, 1. This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, episode 422. Welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast. I am your host today, Jacob Paulson, substituting for Riley Bowman. I am joined by co-host and producer Matthew Marister. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you, and I'm substituting for Jacob Paulson.
So. Yeah, it's really awkward. Thank you for everyone who's joining us live right now on Facebook and YouTube, and thank you to all of you who subscribe to the podcast and listen to the recordings in the audio feed. We love you all and appreciate you being here. It's a bit of a turbulent time here in the U.S. Various things are causing panic and drama and rioting and whatever, but it being the beginning of summer, today's topic, we're going to talk about how to maximize your ROI, how to get the most out of the next class you're going to take. And obviously our primary focus here is on a firearm-related class, a shooting class, though I suppose most of these things we're going to cover probably would apply to any class that you might take. So it's going to be super fun, exciting, and all that kind of stuff.
For sure.
Yeah. Before we get into that, a word from our sponsors. We have two sponsors today. The first one is the Yellowstone kit from Mountain Man Medical. Mountain Man Medical's new brand, a new product line launched in early February. And the thing you need to know about Mountain, like if I really had to distill this brand down like as simple as I could make it, I'd say there's two things you need to know. First, Mountain Man Medical puts only proven, tested, name brand, high quality components in their kits. So the gauze in there, the tourniquets in there, the bandages in there, the gloves in there, none of that stuff is like some random cheap stuff that they picked up from China. All of the components are from proven companies like North American Rescue, H&H Medical, et cetera. Like this is stuff like that's been used, proven, tested, and found to be effective by the U.S. military. So you can have some confidence that everything going into a kit from Mountain Man Medical, including everything in the Yellowstone kit, is quality and name brand and proven and tested. And then the second big core thing that you need to know about that brand is simply that it's the cheapest. That despite having the best components in their trauma kits, that it is the least expensive. That they just operate on lower margins, and they do it to ensure that the highest number of people out there can have quality medical gear. And in fact, if you're a school teacher or active or retired military, or if you're law enforcement or a number of other professions I can't remember right now, you can also save 15%. So go to mountainmanmedical.com and check that out. If you're interested in those discounts based on what you do for a living, you scroll down to the very bottom of the page and they have a thing there that says available discounts. And our second one is Pig Lube. Matthew, I'm going to let you talk about Pig Lube. You actually did an interesting test a year or two ago with Pig Lube and a handful of other lubricants. But tell us about Pig Lube.
Yeah, Pig Lube, I still use it. I love Pig Lube. They have like this little kit, range kit, I think it's called. Has everything in there that you need to clean most of your firearms, different calibers and everything. But the Pig Lube is pretty cool. Not only does it work in lubricating your firearm, but it smells like bacon. So that's how they get the name Pig Lube, right? It smells like bacon, so it's good. But yeah, referencing that article, so I kind of did a Mr. Wizard type experiment in my garage, and I got a drill bit or a drill press, and I took some metal and pennies and lubricated them with different lubrications, and try to keep the same type of friction between the penny and this metal, and just kind of see how long it would take for that lubricant to burn up and things. And so it's not, if you use lubricant like Hoppy's oil or something, it's not an oil. It's not so much of a grease. I think it's somewhat in between. So it stays where it's supposed to be. It doesn't drip out down through your gun and everything like that. It stays where you want it, but it's not as thick as grease, where some people, they'll shoot it, in winter time or really extreme low temperatures. And they're like, I'm afraid that, if I use grease, it's going to, seize up or get gunky in the winter time or something like that. So it's kind of in the middle. So I love it. It smells good, works. And I don't know much more I can say about it. It's good.
And you can buy unscented, certainly, if you don't want the bacon
Sure.
smell. But yeah, one of the ingredients is synthesized bacon grease. And synthesized basically means they're removing all the harmful fats and sugars and all that stuff, and you're just actually left with the actual grease. And then they add to that a synthetic oil that's very fancy and awesome and expensive. And then they add to that these nanoparticles. Think like microscopic ball bearings, effectively, that fill in all the little cracks and gaps in your metal and make it operate better. So yeah, Pig Lube's awesome. Check it out on our website, concealedcarry.com/Pig Lube, and get some of that today. My favorite thing about Pig Lube, frankly, is the applicator. It comes in this like lip gloss style container, and so don't put it on your lips, and don't let your daughter find it or whatever. But it's just slick because there's no waste. I'm not putting oil on a rag or a patch or a cloth and then wiping it on something and hoping it doesn't spill and then throwing all this stuff away. I just pull it out and I just use the applicator to put it where I need it on the gun, and then I put it away. So like it lasts so much longer because there's so little waste.
True. Very, very good point.
All right. So with that, let's get into our topic today. And we labeled the episode today 11 tips to getting the most out of your next class. And we dug up an article I wrote a couple of years ago on the topic, and we might have to tweak this or add to it or anything like that. But I think we kind of break this into three sections. There's things you can do before the class, there's things you can do during the class, and there's also things you can do after the class to really maximize your return on investment. And we have to understand and recognize that some people invest pretty significant money to take one of these classes. I'm trying to think, like the most expensive class I ever took. I took a 2-day class in New Hampshire. That was very expensive for me, right? I had to have plane tickets. I had to have a hotel. I had to buy ammo when I got there. Went through a lot of ammo, 5.56 or 223 ammo. So, it was a very expensive thing for me to take that 2-day class in New Hampshire at SIG Academy. And so if you're investing that much money, like, don't you think that it's worth doing everything possible to get maximize your ROI?
Yeah, super important, right? I mean, and this is coming from the student's perspective, right? Like the instructor is going to do their own thing, but from the perspective of the student, you want to get what out of you can't help getting to a class and saying, hey, the instruction wasn't as great as I thought, right? That's kind of like on the instructor and things like that. We can talk about that, like how you can kind of vet your instructors. That's one of the things. But like, yeah, it's important that you get what you're putting into it, because I mean, we all have a set amount of funds that we have to spend, right? So we got to make it work.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, the more you spend, the more hopefully you'd be inclined to make sure you get the most out of it. If I'm taking a 4-hour class at the local gun range for $60, which I haven't done that in a very long time, but if I then I might not go to as much effort, right, and do all the things maybe that we're talking about today. But there's still some of these things that take very little effort. Frankly, it's just knowing to do it well, and you're going to get more out of your class.
Yep.
So the first thing on our list, Matthew, is have the right gear. So how many times do you see a student show up and because they didn't come prepared with the right gear, they're not going to have a super fun day?
Yeah, it happens quite a bit. Not so much like you said in the basic classes, right, where you're not drawing from holsters repeatedly or getting into compromise and different positions, but the big ones that I think of is not having a good gun belt, not having a good holster. So when you're drawing, your holster's coming off the belt with the gun, or you've never vetted your gear and the screws start backing out or whatever, and you realize that your holster falls apart, or your mag pouch falls apart, or you don't have a mag pouch, or you don't have a secondary magazine, or that magazine you've never used before and it always jams, or something like that, right? And that just makes it very frustrating for you and the other students and the instructor, because now instead of running through your magazine changes and working on that, you're working on double feeds and gear falling all over the place, and you can't get the training that you should be getting as far as those individual core fundamentals.
And I think there's a challenge here, because a large percentage of the people who show up in a class, their first like all day range class on the range, they're running new gear. I mean, a lot of times our students,
Sure.
they just bought that gun, or they just bought that holster. They bought. I mean, a lot of times people are buying the gear for the class. They're like, oh, I'm taking this class. It says I have to have this stuff, so I'm going to go buy it. Well, that makes it hard to know if it's going to work really well for you. And so I understand that there's a bit of a conflict. On one hand, we're saying, hey, you need all this gear, so go get it. And then on the other hand, we're saying, make sure it's tested before you get there.
You're right.
Well, that's a bit challenging. I guess I have a couple thoughts. One would be the better you can vet that gear in advance of buying it, via watching reviews online or YouTube videos. But also, don't hesitate to just ask the instructor. Hey, I just signed up for your class. I saw you require I have X, Y, and Z. I'm thinking about buying the Blackhawk whatever and the Bush Killer 5000 thingamajigger. Do you think these are good products, and will they be adequate for the class, or should I look at something else? That's an easy email to send, and I very rarely get those. Very rarely do I have a student, and I don't know if it's a matter of like it's intimidating to contact your instructor and ask questions, or if it's embarrassing, or I don't know why, but very rarely do we have a student call us and say, hey, what do you think about this gear that I'm thinking about getting for the class? So that would be my thought, is, just making a phone call and saying, hey, this is what I have, I'm planning on bringing, or this is what I'm thinking about buying to bring to the class. Do you think it's adequate, or it's going to work well? It's going to go a long way. And my other thought on this gear, on this idea of bringing the right gear, is it's okay to borrow or rent. A lot of students, it's like, okay, I just paid for this expensive class. Now I find out I need $200 worth of gear to take with me. Well, maybe I don't know what holster I want, or I don't know what light I want to put on my gun for this low light class I'm going to take. And so contacting the instructor and saying, hey, I'm not sure yet what I want. Are there going to be some things I can use, like I can borrow or rent at the class, so I can try a few different lights on my gun and see which one I like. Then that's great too, because then you might have a little bit of frustration at the class because it's not anything you've been able to test in advance. But on the flip side, you might be able to use 2 or 3 different things and leave that class with great clarity of what you want to go purchase.
Yeah, I think those are really, really smart points, because, from the instructor point of view, there's nothing, I don't want to say there's nothing, but one of the things I hate doing is seeing a student who, they just bought all this gear and it's falling apart on them. And they're realizing, like, I spent like $80 extra on top of the course fee for all this gear so I'd be prepared, and I want to be prepared, and I'm here, and I'm ready to go. And you see them saying, oh my gosh, like all this stuff is not working out, and I need to go spend more money now to buy actual gear. And so it hurts me, like especially with guns and things, they go buy a gun and then they realize it's not what they wanted. And so yeah, I'm the same boat. I've had some students reach out before and say, hey, what do you think about this? I don't have a spare magazine, but this and that, I was thinking about buying this. And I've said, hey, I have a couple extra spares, don't worry about magazine holder or whatnot, or I have Glock magazines aplenty. But it is rare, and it's nice to have them reach out. It really is. And trust me, if you guys are thinking about taking a class like that, reach out to the instructor, because also it starts to get you that personal contact with the instructor beforehand, and they know, hey, this student wants to be there. They want to train well, and they're ready to listen and learn and stuff. And it lets the instructor know, hey, the student's there and ready to go. So I think it helps in so many different levels.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So that's number one, guys. Have the right gear. If that means buying it, vet it before you buy it. Ask the instructor for feedback. If you need to rent or borrow, call in advance and see if you can. Most instructors have been doing this for a while. I bring like 3 sets of guns, holsters, mags, and mag pouches to every big class I teach. So that if someone's gear goes down, I'm like, no problem. Like here's an entire loadout you can borrow. Not every instructor may be able to do that, but if you check with them, it's going to be helpful. The one time I really got caught up in trouble. I had a student, had an issue. They showed up with a holster that was like, no way, no how, you cannot use that in this class. And they had a relatively new gun on the market, and they were left-handed. I was like, we don't have a holster for this gun, so we just had to give them a different gun to run. And it was sad they couldn't run the gun they had just purchased in the class, but we just didn't have any backup holsters, left-handed holsters for this relatively new model. So yeah. All right, number 2, Matthew, tell us about this one. Learn as much about the class and the instructor as you can in advance of the class.
Yeah, so this is one that you pointed out, and another, something that might go overlooked. So you sign up for a class and you're like, it's I don't know, whatever pistol, pistol 2, pistol 3, whatever, and they give you a brief synopsis of the class, and you're like, okay, you will be covered this, and this, and you're like, okay, it sounds good to me. But if you have any ability to go online and see these guys, the instructor's Facebook page or YouTube, or if there's videos of different drills that they run in the class, or a little snippet of things you're going to be doing in the class, it's going to give you an understanding of, hey, it's not saying that you have to go in there being able to do all this stuff, but going in there with the idea of, these are the things I'm going to be asked to do. And because the last thing you want to do is show up to a class and have it become overwhelming for you, either physically or skill-wise, right? Where you get into a class that is over your head skill-wise, is causing you to be completely tired out, and you can't participate and do things safely or learn things. And that's not only is it a bad thing ROI, but it's also kind of a safety thing. I remember we had a student, and God bless him, but he through the heat and everything, he couldn't keep up. It was a very high stress, or not high stress, but we were doing a lot, and it was hot, and he just couldn't come back the next day because it was just overwhelmingly physically for him. So if you're concerned or wondering about, hey, what are the requirements that I'm going to have to be doing? I've had students that have been amputees, and most of the time you can change the course to help them if they can't get into a certain position or do certain things. But if you're expected to do X, Y, and Z, and you physically can't because of a physical disability or something, that's something that you should kind of talk to the instructor beforehand, right? And so you can give them the heads up, hey, this is going to be something that I'll need some help with or work around.
Yep, great thoughts. There's even just like learning the instructor's philosophies about certain things. Maybe that instructor has very strong feelings about how to rack a slide properly, or They
Sure.
clear double feeds different than everybody else, or whatever. Like anything you can learn about that instructor and like how they do things, what they do, or how they, certain things they feel strongly about. It's going to help you out. Like you're going to come to the class with better expectations. You're going to learn things faster. You'll pick up things faster. You'll understand and comprehend things faster too. All right, next on our list here is dry fire practice. I'm thinking of a situation. I had a student show up, and this was a level 2 course, and the student had taken my level 1 class the year prior. So it had been 12 months, but they had taken it. And we're doing some of the initial exercises, and I'm thinking to myself, and I'll just never forget this moment because it hit me so hard. I'm like, I'm pretty sure they forgot everything they learned a year ago. And I don't know that they've forgotten it as much as it was clear that they hadn't practiced it, and certainly not recently. And with a little bit of work, obviously they caught up fast, and it was fine. But the point is, if I'm going to take a class on Saturday this week, I'm going to do a little bit more dry fire. I'm going to go to the range advance. And I'm just going to freshen up my skills. I'm going to make sure that everything's on point, that I'm fresh, that that I've really drilled some of those things early on. If I can see the class curriculum and I know what's going to be covered, then I'm going to focus on specific things that I know I'm going to be asked to do. It's going to make me safer. It's going to make me better. I'm going to be able to adapt quicker, and I'm going to be able to learn more. Because if I'm focused on like, why am I doing this wrong? Crap, what's wrong with me? Then it's going to be hard for me to pick up on the new stuff I'm paying to be taught. So, doing a little dry fire and freshening up your skills before a class is going to go a long way.
Yeah, I think a perfect example of that is if you go to a class that builds on other skills and you have a poor draw stroke, right? And every time you draw, your grip, the grip that you're building from is poor. You're not going to be able to grasp the concepts of what's happening after that if you're always focused on trying to get that draw stroke correct, because you haven't established that. And that's the foundational thing that everything else is going to be building off of as you draw the gun, right? So it's like those little things start to detract from you being able to learn those other skills because the foundational one is lacking. So, and hopefully, if you get to a class like that and an instructor sees, hey, you're struggling in a foundational thing, on a break, they'll pull you aside and kind of try to get you up to that speed. But you're kind of counting on that instructor to notice it and be able to have the time and the ability to kind of speed you up. And so if you can go in there at a level that, like I said, you're not going to be expected to know the material you're going to be taught, but you have to have that basic foundational skill set.
Yeah, the way I would think of it is you should be at your best, whatever that is. Like,
sure.
It's okay to not be awesome at anything that's going to happen in that class. Like, if you're like, well, but Jacob, I suck at drawing, so should I not take a class? Like, no, I'm not saying that at all. Like, go to the class and learn how to draw. What we're saying is what you do know, make sure it's sharp and fresh.
Sure. Yep.
So that you're able to actually learn new things, so that you can grow and not be hampered by the fact that you're just rusty. That's the big problem that we want to avoid here.
Yep.
All right, the next one here, Matthew, and this is kind of, I'll call it an obvious one, but despite it being obvious, it's a constant problem, and that is go in with an open mind. What do we mean by that?
Man, this is huge, and this kind of goes both ways. There's students who've gone to multiple classes and learned from different instructors. And if you're one of those people that have gone to multiple classes from different instructors, you're going to realize that you're probably, saying, I agree with you that instructors teach different principles and concepts for similar things, right? For basic things, even. Not everybody is in lockstep with how to clear, a malfunction or I mean, basic stuff, right? And so if you go into a class as a student and you're trying to show up the instructor by saying, well, I learned it this way, and this is this instructor, and this is that, there are instructors that will take offense to that, and it creates a wall between the communication that's going to happen after that. Like the learning it becomes more difficult. There are instructors that, know that have gone through this and say, hey, I understand you learned it this way and I teach it this way. One way is not the other, right or wrong, but why don't you try it this way? This is how we teach it in this class. And after this class, if you like to go back to the other way of doing it, that's great. But it can't hurt to learn other techniques and see which one you like the best. But make sure that you go in there with the idea that I may learn something new or a new way of doing something that I already did. And it doesn't mean that the other class was wrong and this one is right, or this class is right, or, wrong and the other class is right. You make that determination on what works for you and stuff, but go in there with an open mind, because you'd be surprised at the when you just kind of take off that, bubble of, I know what I'm talking about because I was taught by the best guy, so-and-so, and this guy is wrong. It could be that he's wrong, right? Like, not every instructor's right, but it could be that it's the same side or a different side of the same coin, and he's trying to present it in a different way or look at it in a different light. So open mind is good for the student as well as the instructor, to not kind of be dogmatic in certain things. But some instructors absolutely are. So.
Yeah, I'm thinking in my head right now that if you go take a class at Front Sight in Nevada, and then you go take a class at Gun Sight in Arizona, and then you cruise up to New Hampshire and take a class at Sig Sauer Academy, you're going to quickly realize that those are three large, well-operating, been around a long time academies who all teach some very basic things significantly differently. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't make any of them right. I think what it means is that the point of taking classes often is getting all those different perspectives so that you can learn lots of different ways of doing something and figure out which of those is best for you. Or maybe what's best for you is an adaptation of what I learned here and there mixed together.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of the point. It's what you're paying for. Like, when you take the class, you're paying to figure out how that person says to do some things. And I do think that, to your point, Matthew, a good instructor is also good at saying, hey, here's how I teach it. You can do it or not in this class. It's up to you. But, like, I'm here and you're paying to be here. So you might consider doing it the way I'm teaching it so that you have that opportunity to learn it this way. But a good instructor is probably not going to, throw you out of the class because you refuse to draw the way they say to draw or grip the way they say to grip. And sometimes, it comes up, oftentimes an instructor just has the foresight of knowing that, well, if that's the stance you want to use, it's fine. But when we start moving and shooting, you'll see that you're going to trip over yourself, and we're going to have to fix this. So, those things are just the nature of the beast. All right. So we can say that all day long, and I think most people know you need to go in with an open mind. But I guess it's different to say that, and it's different than to actually do it. Like, that's one of those things that's easy to say and harder to do. You really need to go in and think, I'm going to be a sponge, and I'm going to take everything they say at its value, and later I'll figure it out. So those are all of our kind of pre-class, thoughts about, getting ready and taking advantage and getting as much value as you can before the class starts. So to reiterate, we said have the right gear, learn as much about the instructor in the class as you can, do some dry fire or otherwise prepare and make your current skills as sharp as they can be, knock off the rust, and then go in with an open mind. All right. During the class, pay attention to the other students. This is one that's a Jacob soapbox issue. I see this a lot. We'll be teaching, and by nature of the exercise, we need to break it into groups. So it's like, okay, we're gonna have four. Everyone's gonna line up in some line, and we're gonna have people go one at a time. Or maybe we'll break it into two groups, and the side by side, one instructor is gonna run this group, and the other instructor is gonna run this group. But what happens is people in the back of the line, they're just not paying attention. They'll check in the current text message, or they are chatting with the other guy in the line about, oh, did you hear about whatever happened in New Hampshire? Yep, that's why I carry, and that's they're having conversations, and in my mind, it's like you're missing out on so much value. Like, you are missing it, because if you would watch this other person who's up here at the barricade doing this drill, you would see how they did this thing. And I mean, you might see I come up and I talk to them and I say, oh, blah, 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 blah. And you hearing me tell them something is something you could learn. Mm-hmm. Or you might notice them do something, and after that drill, you might raise your hand like, hey, I noticed that Bob, when he did it, he did this thing. Is that okay? Or is that as good? Or like, should I have done that? Like, there's so much you can learn. I'm going to tell you guys a dirty secret. When I'm in a class, anytime with the lineup for any drill, I never go first. Never. Maybe it's like a paranoia that I'm going to embarrass myself, but I really want to be last because I want to watch every other person go through that drill. I want to see how they do it, what they do well, what they don't do well, what things they try that don't work. I want to hear the instructor provide all the feedback to those people and say, oh, change it, do this way instead. Oh, you're doing this wrong. I want to hear, and I'm going to soak all that up. And when I go through at the end, I'm going to have the best run I can have because I did all that observation and I was taking notes and I was listening and I was paying attention. There's so much to be gained there. I know, Matthew, I might have just like gone too long on that one, but
No.
I think people really miss out.
No, you were reading my mind. I mean, and it's frustrating to the point sometimes because, like to your point, you realize that they're missing out individually on learning, right? Because learning takes place in different ways, right? Like you might learn from listening to the instructor, you might learn from watching the instructor demonstrate, or you may learn from watching somebody do something wrong and be corrected. And so there's all different ways people learn, and if you're taking away one of those aspects, then you're missing out on a potential way that you may be learning something. And it's frustrating when it's, I mean, in everybody, it's going to happen where like somebody gets in a conversation and they're not paying attention, like throughout a 6-hour class or whatever. But when it's the same people over and over, it's frustrating because you look and the other students have paid a lot of money and they want to get training, and you have to slow it down and repeat. Hey, we're going to fire 3 rounds and this is how we're going to do it. Okay, everybody understand? And there are people standing right behind watching them do that. And then they get up and you say, okay, we're going to fire 3 rounds. You guys know the drill? And they're like, wait, what are we doing? And you're like, you just saw somebody fire 3 rounds. You're standing right behind them. Like, you got to pay attention so we can move and get people through and learn in more rounds. And so I don't want to say it's a selfish thing because everybody, is going to be kind of off and talking about things certain times. But like, if I think as a group, you do a lot of good for the whole group when you're engaged and you're learning and hey, I picked this up, and so it just makes it better for you, the instructor, the group as a whole, and everything. So that's a really important thing that it seems like a minor thing, but it's huge.
You've invested your time and your money,
Yeah.
so like there is no shame or embarrassment to you maximizing your return on that investment. Another thing that's kind of along these lines, but I see it as a common issue, is you'll have a few students in the class who didn't bring as many magazines as everybody else, or they're running smaller capacity magazines. And so they have to go back and reload more often than others. And so you'll have a situation where it's like, okay, we're going to run this drill. Everyone's going to go through it. And that's most of the students get done and they're able to stand there and continue to watch. But one student gets done, they like crap them all out. And it's like, yeah, go hurry and top off your mags, before the next drill. They got to run back to the table. They got to load up all their mags. And meanwhile, these other students who brought more magazines or they have higher capacity magazines, they're able to sit there and keep watching and keep learning while, I was trying to think of a fun Fred, while Fred's back at the table, topping off mags again. So, if the instructor says to bring 3 spare mags, and if you have a capacity of 12 or less, bring 5 spare mags, like, just double it. Like, if he says to bring 3, bring 6. If he says to bring 5, bring 10. Because you having more mags available means that you're going to be able to, when everyone's loading mags, you'll be able to load all those up. And when you have opportunities to observe and learn, you'll be able to do that instead of being stuck behind the firing line, topping off mags where you can't pay attention and you can't learn. So another little thing along those lines.
Yeah. Or the instructor might say, hey, we're waiting on those guys. You want to run the drill real quick? You're ready to go. And you're getting more out of out of it. So, yeah.
Absolutely. All right, next one on here, practice mental rehearsal. And what I mean by this, and I mentioned my own personal, fault here and confession that I always go last. I try and go last on a drill. At the very least, I don't want to go first because I want to observe a couple of the people run it. Like what I'm doing while I'm saying that line and I'm listening and I'm watching and paying attention, the other thing I'm doing is I'm mentally rehearsing myself doing that drill. And this is not, to be clear, like this is not about me looking awesome in the class. Like I don't care how I look. This is about me performing at my best so that I learn more, so that my body creates the right synapses, so that my brain is doing it, is remembering the motions. And it's about me performing at my best so that I can get more out of the class. And so if we're doing a box drill, And a box drill throws off a lot of people. It's like you're going to walk forward this way, then you're going to turn, you're going to run the sprint to this side, then shoot, then walk in reverse to this corner, then run over to this corner while shooting, and then walk left again. Some of these drills are quite complex, and so it's like, oh crap. So I'm going to sit in that line, and while one of my fellow students is running that drill, I'm seeing myself doing it. I'm imagining as if I was them. Like I'm seeing through their eyes. I'm like, okay, yep. He says go. I draw. I'm going to walk this way. Bomb. I'm going to shoot here. I'm probably going to have a reload right about here. So then I'll be performing. Like I'm trying to mentally rehearse every exercise in my mind to the best of my ability before it's my turn to step up and do it, so that I can maximize my performance and get the most value from it.
Yeah, and I'll give you the perspective of the instructor once again. And when you have a student and you're like, okay, this is what we're going to do. You're going to move from this piece of cover. As you cross over and you're moving to that piece of cover, I want you to engage this target with a few rounds and that target with a few rounds on the move. Get to the, when you reach the other piece of cover, I want you to assess and go back to the holster. And they're like, okay, got it. And then you see them like, you give them the command, they run across, and then they get to the other side and they start shooting behind cover, and then they go to the holster, and you're like, that was good, you did a great job, but that wasn't the drill, and we're working on this skill. So and it's like you got to take them back, or they miss out on actually the reps of that specific skill that you're trying to try to teach. And so, and not out of a fault of their own, that like maybe they they're purposely doing that, or they were purposely not paying attention, but especially when you have a complex thing or things that you've never done before, it's important to kind of like really put yourself in those shoes and kind of like, okay, let me pay attention to what these students are doing, or let me really like, this is what I'm going to do, okay, blah blah blah. And so when you get up there, you're doing, because oftentimes instructors formulate their classes to build on different skills. So if you're not doing that skill and you're doing something else, it kind of gets it out of whack, and you may not be developing the right skills and the right method and things like that. So that's one of those things, a really good point of just kind of like knowing, mental rehearse, and know what you're going to do before. And if you don't know, please ask the instructor. Like if you have to ask 3 times and say, wait, can you explain it again? This is so you do it the correct way. Not to say you're going to do it, unsafely, but the method of doing it. Ask away. Ask away if you have questions.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And a lot of these things you notice kind of correlate together. We talked about, pay attention, mentally rehearse, right? Don't be afraid to ask. Like these are all critical things. They all work to some of those same objectives. Here's the next one on the list, and this is one I never would have thought of until I saw one of my students doing it, and that is to take notes during the class. So, Matthew, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think Matt, what is that the student you're thinking of?
Oh, I can't remember.
I've seen a couple students take notes, and it's like, it's awesome, right? Because you're like, okay, this guy is going to write down a couple things that to jog his memory or her memory once they get back home or in the future. So because it's a key point to them, right? And it's not to say you got to have like a book where you're writing down everything, but certain things that click in your mind, those times where I'm sure you've seen this, Jacob, when you're talking to a student and all of a sudden you say something in a certain phraseology or for a certain word, and then all of a sudden you kind of see them, oh, okay, now I understand it, right? And it's those types of things that, like, if you write that down, if it's, hey, position my hand like this, and it might be, the phrase that you use of locking your wrist a certain way or doing whatever it might be, right? And that clicks with you. And now I get it. Now I understand. Like I didn't understand. I saw him doing it, but now I understand it. Write that down, because when you go to the range and you don't have that good grip and your follow-up shots aren't great, then you're going to be like, okay, how did I fix that? How did that instructor, and you look, okay, twist my, get my hand, lock it, like, okay, now I remember. And then you have kind of like the instructor in your pocket a little bit, right? And those key things that really make a difference to you. And I think any class that you would take, right? Not just a shooting class, but any class, you would be it's recommended that you take notes, right? Because you want to retain the information and be able to reference it at a later time. And I know we're on a range, we're not sitting behind a desk, so sometimes writing down notes might feel awkward, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's actually very good.
It's not a big deal. Like just get one of those little tiny mini like flip notepads. They're like 3x5 ish, and they're on a spiral, and a pen or a pencil. Just keep it in your back pocket when you're at the range, and instructor drills over. Instructor's going to whip that sucker out, make a note. In addition to writing down things like really resonate with you, you might write down like things to work on, like, oh, I really want to practice this, or you might write down a drill. I really liked the drill when we did, shot at 3 targets left to right, and then we did a reload, then we went backwards, or whatever. Like you might write some of those things down, like, oh, I really want to, I want to try that again later. I want to review, whatever the notes might be. I'm not a note taker by nature, probably why I'm a dropout, but I do think that there's significant value to writing a few things down. Some students might do that on their phone. I had a student once. In fact, he's one of our instructors. He was taking an instructor certification class from us, and he would just, constantly when he'd have his phone out, and he'd be tired. And at some point, I'm like, dude, like, Eric, are you listening, bro? And he's like, I'm taking notes. And I was like, oh, okay. So then it hit me. I'm like, okay, that's awesome. Like he's doing it on his phone, and so I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. But I would say that if you are going to use your phone to take notes, you might tell the instructor in advance, like, hey, is it okay if I take notes? Like, just I have I'm going to use this app on my phone. I'm just going to type notes, and at least that way they know you're paying attention. They don't feel disrespected, because otherwise, like, are you texting while I'm talking? Like, what's up with this?
Yeah, and you know what? Now that you mentioned that with the phone, that's a really good also segue into like asking the instructor, hey, would you mind recording me running this drill? Because I want to be able to do it and I know like I've had students ask me, hey, can you record me? Not just because they want to post it on Facebook. That's cool if they want to do that, right? But they want to see how they're holding their gun or how their feet are moving or what they're doing, right? And it helps them. And I've done that also, once I know a student what it wants, that kind of like, hey, I want that level of, I want to see what I'm doing down to the point. I want to take notes. I'll even sometimes take a video of them without them knowing and say, hey, on a break, hey man, look at this. This is what your hands looked like, and they'll, oh, okay, get your hands up a little bit better next time. And so it gets them, kind of like learning even above the kind of basic learning that's going on in the classroom. It's kind of like another level almost. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, in fact, maybe that should be like our 12th thing on the list is like, get video, or maybe it's part of taking notes, like you said. But you'll see is often you'll see a couple of students who they almost like have I don't know how these things like spontaneously happen, but they have like these agreements between them, like you video me and I video you. And so they're constantly like trading phones, like, oh, it's time for another drill. Right, dude, here's my phone. Like, give me yours, And you're like, at what point did they make these decisions? I didn't even notice. Right. It's just like consistently all day long, like Bob is recording Fred and Fred is recording Bob. And they're constantly handing their phones back and forth. Yeah. And to your point, maybe they're just throwing it up online, but a lot of learning can come from having that video for sure. Yeah. So that's awesome. All right. Next one here is ask for individual feedback. Matthew, I want to put you on the spot as an instructor. What percentage of your students, after the class is complete, follow up with you? Either, maybe at same day, same place, just, everyone else is leaving. They're like, hey, can we talk? Or a phone call or an email or something. And they say, can you give, from what you observed of me, is there anything specific you would give me in terms of feedback? How often does that happen?
I would say probably 10 to 20% after the class will ask questions. Like, hey, what did you think about this? Or, I would say 0 to 5% ever, contact me after a class and say, unless it's an individual class that we were working together on, right?
Sure.
But if it's a normal class, I almost never have somebody say, hey, you know what, what did you think about this? Or do you remember this or that? Or, what can I do to increase on this? Because I remember you saying I was having difficulty coming out of the holster, and I can't really remember exactly what you said to kind of help me get through that little, hiccup I was having. So typically, like, if they're going to ask, it's right after the class, right? Like, people are saying, hey, thanks for the class, great class. Oh, and they'll kind of like go into that. And I don't know if it's because they, just want to get out of there and they want to get home, or they feel kind of like, okay, I don't want to bug the instructor and get, in an individual conversation, or I'll do it later and they never get around to it. But whatever it is, asking for individual feedback is very rare.
Yeah, it's very rare. I've had it happen. I can think of twice that it's happened to me. In both those instances, the students bought me dinner. They
Wow.
basically, before the at the beginning of the day, hey, do you have plans tonight for dinner? Can I buy you dinner after the class? Sure. Okay. Like, I love free food. That's not hard at all. And then, class gets over, we go out to dinner, and they're like, hey, so like what, and they're asking questions. How can I improve? I know I certainly have done that. If I'm going to pay a lot of money and take a class, I'm going to ask that instructor very pointedly, like, what would you recommend for me to work on? Like, you just watched me for a day or two or three. Like, what would you tell me to do next? Because that's not something they're going to do in a group of 8, 10, 12, 20 people. They're not going to like go one by one, like, okay, this is what you should work on. This way. Yeah. And frankly, there are some classes where there is actually time set aside for individual feedback. But for the most part, that doesn't happen unless you ask for it. All right. Next on my list is debrief. And what I mean by debrief is this is just about it's like a self-introspection ponder time. It's about you just, sitting down, maybe it's the next day or something, and you just writing down some additional insights. Consider the feedback you received from the instructor and just say, hey, what do I really want to remember from this, and just writing it down. If it's a multi-day class, I would do this at the end of each day. Every night I would just take some notes and do a personal debrief. I have, in addition to just writing down any personal insights, I will also take the time to actually write down everything about the curriculum I can. I'll try and remember, okay, first we did this drill, and then he talked about this, and then we did this exercise. I'm not trying to copy the instructor's curriculum. I'm not a loser, but I am just trying to really map as much of it out as I can, so that the next time I go to the range, I can look back at them like, oh yeah, we did that cool drill on that day, or we did this first and then we did this, and then my time was this, and so I'm going to go do that drill again today. And so as much as you could kind of just debrief, I think there's value to that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that gives you the ability to sort of pick up those things that you want to ask the instructor, right? Like, if you don't do that, maybe you don't reflect on those things, and it doesn't kind of trigger you to go to the instructor and say, hey, can I get my times for this? Or what was that drill you call, I've had students ask me hey, can you send me all the drills we ran in the class? And I'm like, I can, but it's much more, if you want to know, hey, what drill did we do to work on this specific skill, or it's much more impactful than, hey, just send me a list of all the drills, because I can say, hey, I got all the drills on my webpage, go check it out, right? And that doesn't really do much for you. But if you're saying, hey, that one drill that we did this, what were we working on with that? What was the purpose of that? And can you send me my times, or what were my times for that? If you debrief on your own, it may turn into a debrief where it causes you to get with the instructor and get those things. And I would also say, as far as the instructor may be asking you while he's debriefing with you, or while you're asking questions, hey, how did I do? What was the best point that you picked out, or what things really resonated with you, or could we have done something different that would have helped move the class along more smoothly? And that gives you the ability to say, to better the class for the next student, and to kind of maybe you're going to take further instruction from this instructor, and that feedback from the students is really valuable for that instructor, to better the class, better the curriculum, better his or her teaching style. So all those things in the debrief are big for you immediately, from that class, or maybe inadvertently, or I don't know what, coming later if you end up taking a class or you're helping out future students. So,
Yep. Yep. Nothing to add to that. The next one kind of comes right out of that, out of this debrief, and that is plan your practice routine. I don't remember what episode it is, but at some point many moons ago, we introduced this idea of training, practice, and learning. That's kind of the three, kind of the cycle we think of in our business, and how we present this idea that training is you getting information from an instructor in a formal place, generally, that you pay for. learning is like listening to this podcast, and practice is taking those things and getting repetition, trying to master the skill. So when you come out of the class, you really want to look at it and say, okay, what am I going to go practice now? I really feel like I need to work on my grip, and I really need to work on target transitions, or I need to work on cadence, or I need to work on, really making follow-up shots really, solid, or my groupings are not tight enough, or whatever it is. And so, planning my practice routines. Well, these are the drills that I'm going to start running at the beginning and the end of every time I go to the range on my own, so I can measure how I'm doing. And between running those drills, I'm going to do these exercises to work on this, or in my dry fire, I'm going to focus on these little micro drills or whatever it is. So having a really, really good idea of what am I going to do next? What is my routine going to look like for practice is really important. And then the last one, Matthew, I'll let you cover this one, is pick out your next class immediately. Like when you finish taking a class, your last thing you should do to kind of bring all this full circle is decide what the next class is.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a wise thing, because when you start taking advanced classes, I think there's a kind of a feeling that like, okay, I've been there and I've done it, right? Like I've taken all the pistol 2 or the tactical pistol 2 or, advanced pistol 1 and 2, like everybody calls it something different, right? And I've taken that, so I need to go on to something else. And I think that there's something to be said about saying, okay, I've taken this advanced pistol class here. What's another pistol class that can build off of these skills even more, right? Like it doesn't mean you take an advanced pistol class, and now I have to take a vehicle class, or now I have to take a extreme close quarters or ground fighting class or knife class. Those are awesome classes, and I'm not saying don't take them. I totally take them. I'm just saying, like, just because you've taken X class from one instructor doesn't mean if you take a class that's similar that you won't learn something from that same sort of level class from another instructor. So I would say start planning out, hey, what are my goals? Like, do I want to start taking a vehicle class? Is that something that's important to me? Or do I feel like, hey, I want to work on these skills, and I want to get another instructor's point of view on how to grip a gun or how to move from cover to cover and blah, blah, blah. Because like we said, everybody, instructors teach things differently, and you might pick up something that you didn't pick up from this instructor and that, and vice versa. So I think planning out your classes from not like a hierarchical thing where I've done this, now I must do this, now I must do this. It's a progression of that isn't so. I've graduated 7th grade, now I go to 8th grade, right? I've taken pistol 1, now I must go to pistol 2, and I can't take pistol 2 from this instructor because I've already taken pistol 2. So I don't know if that makes sense, but as you start to plan out your future training, think of it more as a holistic thing.
I mean, I don't think there's a single thing wrong whatsoever with you finishing a class, going through this process, and saying, what, the next class I'm going to take is the exact same one I just finished.
Sure.
Maybe I just want to repeat it. Maybe I just want to do it again. I don't, there would not be any shame in that at all. And frankly, it's probably a really dang good idea. We have a few students who have repeated our entire 3-day curriculum with us, 2 summers in a row. They just want to do the whole thing again. And hopefully that means they enjoy it first off, but more importantly, they feel like, hey, I want to start from the beginning. I want to hit these fundamentals again. I want to go through it all again. And I think that's super valuable. So yeah, I think the key here is, in my world, if I ask you the question, anyone who's listening to this right now, what's the next class you're going to take? And you say, I don't know, you have a problem that you need to solve. Like, at any given time in this community, if we're serious about building our shooting skills, you should be able to answer that question, at least to some degree. Well, I'm choosing, I'm between this one and this option. One is in August and one is in October. I haven't signed up yet, but I'm deciding. Okay, that's viable. Like, props to you. But if your answer is I don't know, then I think you're missing out. At any given time, we should know what our next step in the journey is going to be, and that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, that gives you 11, or maybe there were 12 in there, 12 things that you can do to get the most value out of your next shooting course. It's the summer. If you don't have a class that you signed up for, go sign up. It's been a bit of a turbulent season relative to instructors having to cancel classes, either because the ranges aren't open or because less people are willing to get out get out into groups of other people, and so just enrollment's down, and sometimes a small class has to be canceled. But enroll, sign up. If you're worried, check the return or refund policy. But get out there and make sure you're signed up for a class.
Sure.
I like Sean's comment here on Facebook. He says the best class to take is the next one. And I really appreciate that it's always about looking forward and deciding what the next thing is going to be. Okay, Matthew, I think that wraps it up. A reminder that our sponsors today are Pig Lube and the Yellowstone Kit from Mountain Man Medical. You can learn more at mountainmanmedical.com, or you can learn more about Pig Lube at concealedcarry.com/Pig Lube. If you haven't recently, or you have never, written us a review on iTunes, can I please ask you to do that? If you don't have an iTunes account, you can look for a different platform where you can review our podcast, maybe like Podbeam, or a lot of these podcast apps are now allowing reviews. I still don't know if Google Play Music is or not. That'd be one you could check. But if you'll please go write us a review. If you have before, but it's been a while, go write us another one. Most of these platforms will let you write as many reviews for any given podcast as you'd like. So we would love to see some updated and recent feedback and comments from you guys. And obviously those reviews help us rank higher on those platforms and help more people find our podcast and get the same education and training that we hope you're enjoying. That's it from me, Matthew. Any last words?
No, just thanks, guys, for always listening and being loyal listeners. And we love you guys, and stay safe.
There you have it from the words of Matthew Marister. Remember to train right, train often, train safe, so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care, everyone. And for those of you who have been joining us live here on YouTube and on Facebook, thank you for taking the time to be here with us live. Hopefully you get value out of doing that and our ability to kind of see some of your questions and be able to respond to those as we go. Mark says it's funny that we were doing a training podcast without the head of training. Yeah, that's true. Director of training wasn't here for our training episode. That's his problem. Maybe I'm a better student than him, though, so maybe I'm more qualified to speak on this topic.
We'll see. We'll see. Maybe he'll respond to some of the your posts, and
we'll see. Indeed, we had a different topic that me and Matthew thought about tackling, and we said Riley will be angry if he doesn't get to have his word on that one. So we didn't do that one, and I'm not going to disclose what it is. Only that Riley would have been upset that he didn't get to give his 2 cents. So we thought this one was neutral enough he would let us go. Okay, very good. I think that's it then, guys. We appreciate you being here. Until next time.